Hey everybody, and welcome back to our web design from scratch series. Today we're looking at responsive websites. So if you followed the videos up to this point, you now have a site that works really great on a desktop like a computer, but it may not look so great on a mobile screen. And you can kind of test this by making it small. You'll see that things start to get squished. Things don't look that great. Some of the text is overlapping. It just starts to break at a really small size. And this is the problem that happens when you build a website the traditional way, which is sort of how it's always been. Now that we've got devices that have such small resolution, smaller displays like a phone, we need to make our website compatible for those smaller screens. And this is where the idea of a responsive website comes in. A responsive website is basically saying that the website will respond no matter what size or display that it is put onto. All right, and this isn't just for websites. If you're building an app as well, and it has to expand to fit, whether it's an iPad or a phone or a monitor or whatever, it's the same principle. So in the last video, when we finished off, we were making some animations. That was the last thing we had done. And now what we're going to do is we're going to look at actually how we can implement smaller screens and responsive elements to our website. So head over to your CSS. You'll see that the last section was the animation section. We're going to add a section underneath that. I'm just going to put a comment. Keeps me organized. I'm going to call it mobile website. Okay. So everything below, whoops, I can't spell today. Everything below this is going to be what will happen in for the mobile site. All right. So anytime the site goes to a small screen. And so basically what we have to tell it is at what size will the design change, or will these changes take effect? At what size does the screen need to be at? Like, what is the minimum size before these changes come into effect? And this is the command for that. It's at media, okay, only screen and in round brackets max width, whatever size you want this to sort of change at. And I'm going to put 600 pixels because 600 pixels is kind of a good size to work with. And I'm going to put a curly bracket because everything within this section, everything in here that we put in this section in between these two brackets is what's going to be affected when the browser width changes to less than 600 pixels. All right, so again, if you're thinking of a phone, for example, that would be a good example of where that screen size is going to get down to a much smaller width. And just to show you that it's going to work, hopefully, because I've had a few bugs with this, what we're going to put into this section is what do we want to change in the site. So like I said, if we kind of shrink this site down and we look, we see a lot of things that are breaking. We're going to fix those. But let's just create sort of a visual effect so we know that it is switched into this area. The way this works is really simple. If you don't put anything in here, then nothing will change. Meaning that if this is blank, it doesn't know what to do. The only thing you put into these brackets are the parts of the site that you want to see changes on. So for example, if let's say when the screen size gets under 600, we want the body of the site to have maybe a background color change. So we could put background color. Maybe it changes to light green, just so we can see that it's actually changing. Okay, and we hit save on that. You won't see anything happen over on this side until you shrink it below the 600. And now look at what happens. As soon as we hit 600 pixels, you will now see that the background of the site changes to that light green. And so this is telling us that this is working. It is responding to the fact that when the site gets below 600, everything in here is going to take effect. All right, so now what we can do is we can take a look at the site at that small size as soon as it turns green, and we can start fixing some of the problems that we see with the site. Things that maybe we don't like the way it's displaying on a small screen. So, for example, one thing you may not like is the fact that the image, this background hero picture, is set to, I think it was 400 pixels. So what we could do is we could just say main, because that was the class name for it. We could tell it that when it's at a small size, the height is now auto, which means it'll set the height to whatever it thinks it should be. All right, and you won't see much of a difference there, but it will take effect on a much smaller screen. So we'll leave that in there. Let's say maybe the main left part of the site. You'll notice that some of these what's it called, blocks. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I screwed up on what I just told you. I'm sorry. In the main section is actually this green section. Sorry. I had it set to 400, but as you saw when it was small, let's just take this out for a second. I'll just put some comments here. Whoops, to comment that out. This will solve the problem where when the site gets really small, I have to save it. See how that text runs out of the block? Okay, that's because the block is staying at 400, but the text is continuing to expand beyond the 400. So when you put in height auto on a smaller screen, that will allow that text to flow out of that block. Okay, so that's good. That's what we want. Let's do another thing here. Let's actually focus on this main section, this section first. You notice that the old margins that we had in there are huge now. And the picture on the right goes right off the side of the page. Because again, we're using margins and padding and all sorts of stuff that worked great on the desktop size, but it doesn't work great on the mobile size. So let's change that. So we're going to put dot main left, which is the text area of that block. We're going to tell it to display maybe as a block instead. We're going to tell it that now the width of the block should be 100%, so it's going to take up all the available space it can. On our right margin, we're going to set it to 0 pixels. And maybe on the bottom margin now, let's set that to something like 50 pixels. And what you're going to see now is it pushes that picture down, okay, because it's a block. It's not an inline block. It basically has now created space between the write-up and the picture, which means that when this opens up to a larger size, they'll be side by side. But when it gets to a really small size, now the text and the picture are going to separate, and they're going to go down to the lower sort of area here. Yeah, I think that's all right. I don't think we have to change much there, but let's do the same thing to the main right. Main right. This time, same thing. We're going to put it as a display block so it doesn't try to jump up next to the text anywhere. Let's make sure that the picture is centered, even though it looks pretty good. We'll make sure it's centered there. And let's set the width of the picture, because if I remember right, we had the picture set to an actual set size. Let's instead change it to 40% of whatever the size of the page is. That will probably shrink it a little bit, but it'll guarantee that no matter how small this thing gets, it's always going to look okay. Let's save that. Yeah, we didn't see much change there, but that should fix it so that if the size of the window gets really small, it's going to shrink as well. Okay, so that's all right. That all looks good. Everything looks good. One thing I want to mention about when you're doing the media size, whatever you put into here are the parts that you want to see changed from what's up here. So if you look, I'm just scrolling up. If I look at the main left, you'll see that there's actually quite a bit more, I think, in there up here. And that's because I don't want to change. Like, for example, vertical align top, it's still going to be vertical align top. So I'm not changing that. The only thing I put down here is the parts that are going to change when it goes under 600. So you don't have to worry about everything. You only worry about the parts that are going to change. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, let's do the same thing down here with our services section. Okay, because as you can see, these icons are getting all clumped up. The text is becoming non-readable. The circles are starting to overlap with each other. I think it would look better if they were running sort of down the page instead. So let's fix that as well while we're at it. Services. Same deal. First thing we can do is we can set the height to auto so that we have room for the block to expand if it needs to. Padding. Bottom, we'll put a little extra because you can see that we're getting kind of close here. Put that maybe to 50 pixels so we got a little bit of room. We'll save that. Okay. Now we still have all the icons sitting next to each other, so we're going to do the same thing as we did with the text in the picture above. We're going to go to service columns, which is what the name of the class for these icons was. And we're going to say display block. So that will change them from an inline block to a display block, which means they will they'll stack up vertically rather than horizontally. And let's just make sure that they are all centered. We'll do text align, centered. Make sure that they are all lined up. I can save as I go so you can see what it's doing. Okay. And let's do width of 100%. Okay, this is very important because otherwise those divs are going to be super small and they're all going to sit next to each other. So you want to make sure that the divs are 100%. And I like to even put a margin, just so we're safe, of 10 pixels, and we're going to save that. Okay, and we don't see anything change just yet. I'm not sure why. They should have changed. Did I maybe spell? Oh, I didn't put services columns. Ah, boy. You see, you make one little mistake like that and nothing works. I'm like, why are they not responding? There we go. Now they're responding. Okay. Forgot the S in services columns. Okay. And now you can see that they run vertically now instead of horizontally. So as soon as we get into that bigger size, they'll switch back. But when we get to the small size now, we're telling them to run vertically instead. Okay? So again, we're slowly making little changes to the site that will dress it up and make it look better for the mobile view. We're going to make a couple more changes, and then in the next video, we're going to look at how to make the actual, it's called a hamburger menu, which appears in mobile menus. You've probably seen them before. We'll talk more about that after. But let's make a few more changes. Let's change the hero section. So let's change a couple of things. If you notice in mobile, the block here sure gets close to the top of the screen. You'll notice when I expand that, it drops down a bit, a little bit more easier to see. Let's make sure we've got a little more space. So let's go in here, same section, hero. Let's add a little more padding to the top. Okay, we're gonna go maybe 70 pixels. Oops. Okay, oops, and I put padding. Please do not copy my mistakes. Put padding left. We'll put that to 0. So that's right up to the left there. And we'll put padding right as well. We'll set that to 0. And let's make sure that the content, let's align the content of that content to the center. Save that. Okay, so now we've got it pushed up against the side. Don't worry, we're going to make it look better in a second. All right, but now you can see it it has pushed itself over. We are going to fix this title in a second. All right, so now we've got the hero itself looks better. It's fixed up, but let's do the actual hero title, and let's make sure that is going to look better. And if you don't remember what the hero title is, that was this block here. So margin, auto, I don't know if you guys remember that from before, that should center it. Okay, when you put margin auto, it's going to push that div to the middle. Okay, let's maybe change, what else can we change? We got a good border, don't have to change the border radius or the background, that all looks good. Padding looks, well, let's change the padding a little bit. Let's go padding of maybe, let's see how 10 pixels look. I wonder if that's similar to what we had before. Yeah, I think that is how we had it before. Our width, we will make it, let's say 90%. I don't remember what it was before. There, that's better. It fills the page a little better. And we could even do a little more of a top margin here. We could maybe go margin top of, I don't know, let's go, I want to see what 50 looks like. It might actually move up with that. Didn't change much. Let's go to 80. It doesn't seem to be changing it for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, let's not put that in. Let's save that. That looks great. Okay, and so in the next video, we are going to start building our mobile menu, also known as a hamburger menu. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So if you, just to summarize again, and I don't want to confuse anybody, I hope I didn't go too fast. This command, this section here, this is the most important part for mobile responsive sites. The at media only screens, which means only on screens and less than a max width of 600. Everything inside of here will take effect. All right, so think of it as a separate site. That's the way I think of it anyways. It's like a separate site with changes that are specific to only when you are in mobile view. All right, so stay tuned for the next one. We will, like I said, start finishing this site. We're getting close to the end here, and things are looking good.